What if the greatest mystery writer of all time hid her most dangerous secret, not in a locked room, but in plain sight within the pages of her own novels? A single letter arrives at Hercule Poirot's door, signed only a C, daring him to unravel a code that has baffled scholars and cryptographers for decades. Is it a game, a trap, or a truth so profound it could rewrite the legacy of Agatha Christie? Why has this shadowy figure chosen Poirot, and what lies at the end of a trail that winds through murder, betrayal, and a forgotten society guarding a literary treasure? The clock is ticking, and Poirot's little gray cells face their greatest challenge yet. Chapter 1. The enigmatic letter in the waning light of a crisp October afternoon in 1938. Hercule Poirot sat in his meticulously ordered London flat at Whitehaven Mansions. The room was a study in symmetry. Twin armchairs flanked a polished mahogany table. A silver tea service gleamed on a sideboard, and a faint scent of lavender polish lingered in the air. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a pinstripe suit with a neatly folded pocket square, sipped his tisane, his mustache twitching slightly, as he savored the herbal warmth. The world outside buzzed with the hum of London horse-drawn cabs clattering alongside motor cars. The distant chime of Big Ben, but within these walls, time seemed to pause, held captive by Poirot's unyielding need for order. The tranquility was shattered by a sharp rap at the door. Poirot's valet, George, entered with a silver tray bearing a single envelope. "A letter for you, sir," he said, his voice as crisp as the starched collar of his shirt. "Delivered by hand, no return address." Poirot's green eyes narrowed as he took the envelope. Whoa! It was a fine cream vellum, sealed with a dab of crimson wax, bearing no crest. The handwriting was elegant, almost calligraphic, addressed simply, "To M. Hercule Poirot." Key turned it over, noting the absence of any clue to its origin. "Curio," he murmured, slicing it open with a pearl-handled letter opener. The letter inside was brief, penned in black ink with a flourish that suggested both confidence and secrecy. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as the greatest detective of our age precedes you. I present to you a challenge worthy of your little gray cells, a code hidden within the works of Agatha Christie that has eluded scholars, cryptographers, and even the most ardent of her admirers. It is a puzzle of words woven through her, tales of murder and mystery, waiting for one such as you to unravel its secrets. Seek the truth where the pages turn, for the key lies in plain sight, yet unseen. I sign only as one who knows. I see yours in intrigue." A.C. Poirot read the letter twice, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. "A.C.," he mused aloud. "Agatha Christie, perhaps. Nan, it is too simple. And yet—" His voice trailed off as he leaned back, the cogs of his mind already turning. The audacity of the challenge intrigued him. Code hidden in novels. It was a puzzle unlike any he had encountered. No bloodstains, no footprints, no alibis to dissect. Only words. Words he knew could be as treacherous as any murderer. He rose, crossing to his bookshelf, where a row of Agatha Christie's novels stood in pristine condition, their spines aligned with military precision. The mysterious affair at Styles, her first, caught his eye. He plucked it from the shelf, its familiar green cover evoking memories of Captain Hastings and the case that had launched his literary fame. "If there is a code," he said to himself, "it is here, in the beginning, where all great stories start." Poirot settled at his desk, the lamp casting a warm glow over the pages. He began to read, not for pleasure, but with the precision of a surgeon, dissecting each sentence for anomalies. The story of Styles unfolded Emily Inglethorpe's murder, the poisoned cocoa, the tangled web of motives, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. He noted the dialogue, the descriptions, the seemingly innocuous details. On page 47, a phrase struck him as odd. The clock on the mantel struck 13. He paused, pencil hovering. Clocks do not strike 13. A misprint, or something. More, he flipped to the next chapter, searching for similar irregularities. In a conversation between Hastings and Mary Cavendish, a line read, "The shadow falls where none should stand." The phrasing was poetic, almost out of place in the practical tone of the narrative. Poirot jotted it down, his pulse quickening. Another chapter mentioned a lock with no key, described in passing during a scene at the estate's gatehouse. These phrases, scattered like breadcrumbs, seemed deliberate. Yet their meaning eluded him. The clock on his own mantala, far more reliable, one chimed 8, and Poirot realized he had been reading for hours. He rang for George, who appeared with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. "George, my good man, have you ever read the works of Madame Christie?" George, ever the picture of decorum, raised an eyebrow. "I've glanced at Murder on the Orient Express, sir. Rather gripping, if I may say." "Gripping, oui, but perhaps more than that." Poirot handed him the letter. "Read this, and tell me what you think." George scanned the page, his expression unreadable. "A code, sir. Sounds like a lark, if you'll pardon the expression. But the initials A, could they be a pseudonym? Someone playing a game with you, perhaps," Poirot said, stroking his mustache. "But a game with purpose. This is no idle prank. The writer knows of my methods, my reputation. They wish to test Hercule Poirot." He tapped the letter against his palm. "Tomorrow, George, you will visit the bookshops. Bring me every first edition of Madame Christie's works you can find. The original printings, mind you. There is a code. It may lie in the earliest texts, before revisions muddied the waters." George nodded, though a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. "Very good, sir. Shall I prepare your supper, Nan? Nan, I am not hungry for food, only for answers." Poirot waved him away, returning to Styles. He read until the small hours, his eyes straining under the lamplight. By dawn, he had marked a dozen phrases across the novel, each slightly off-kilter, a reference to a mirror with no reflection. A gardener's mention of roses that bloom in winter, a maid's cryptic remark about time running backward. Individually, they could be dismissed as stylistic flourishes, but together they formed a pattern. Poirot's instincts told him he was on the cusp of something extraordinary the next morning. George returned with a stack of books, their covers worn but intact. "First edition, sir, as requested, cost a pretty penny, but the bookseller on Charing Cross swore they're authentic." "Excellent, George." Poirot examined the stack. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Toe. The Mystery of the Blue Train, Peril at End House. He opened Roger Ackroyd, his fingers tracing the familiar prose. Almost immediately, he found another anomaly. A character's name, Dr. Shepherd, was misspelled as Shepherd in one instance, but only in the first edition. A deliberate error. He cross-referenced it with Styles, noting that the page numbers of the odd phrases in both books aligned with the sequence. 47, 94, 141. Doubling each number led to the next, suggesting a mathematical progression. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "It is a code, but one of layers, like an onion. Peel one, and another lies beneath." Spent the day comparing the novels. His desk, soon littered with notes. Spixed of phrases, when listed, formed no obvious message, but their placement hinted at a structure. He arranged them by page number, then by chapter, then alphabetically, but nothing clicked. Frustration gnawed at him, yet he refused to yield. "Patience, Hercule," he muttered. "The little gray cells, they do not fail." That evening, a second knock interrupted his work. George, looking unusually flustered, presented another envelope. "Delivered just now, sir." Same handwriting, same wax seal. Poirot's heart quickened as he opened it. The message was even briefer. Monsieur Poirot, you have begun well, but the path is long. Look to the stars, where the story began. The code awaits. A.C. stars, Poirot repeated, pacing the room. He returned to Styles, scanning for celestial references. A minor character, a groundskeeper. Mentioned ascendancy in a throwaway line. The stars were bright over Styles that night. The line was unremarkable in context, but paired with the letter's hint, it felt significant. Poirot stepped outside, gazing at the London sky, though clouds obscured any stars. The metaphor, he realized, was literary. The stars were the key characters or moments in Christie's first novel, where the code began. He sat again, re-examining the marked phrases. What if the code wasn't in the words themselves, but in their positions? He mapped the page numbers of each anomaly across the novels, noting they corresponded to pivotal scenes: the discovery of the body, the revelation of a clue, the unmasking of the killer. The numbers formed a sequence that, when plotted, suggested a cross-reference to another book. He opened The Murder of Roger Ackroyd again, turning to page 94, where the Shefford misspelling appeared. The passage described a clock, echoing the 13 strikes from Styles. A connection. Poirot's mind raced. The code was not a single message, but a trail leading from one novel to the next. He spent hours charting the anomalies across the first editions, finding that each pointed to a specific page in another Christie work. The sequence from Styles led to Roger Ackroyd, which in turn pointed to the mystery of the blue train. It was a literary scavenger hunt, each clue a stepping stone to the next. By midnight, he had traced the pattern to a single sentence in blue. Train, the truth lies in the journey, not the destination. The words resonated, suggesting the code's purpose was as much about the process of discovery as the final revelation. Exhausted, but exhilarated, Poirot leaned back in his chair. The letter had been no jest. Code existed, intricate and deliberate, woven through Christie's novels like a thread through a tapestry. He had confirmed its presence, a triumph that satisfied his need for order. Yet the greater mystery remained. What did the code conceal, and why had a C chosen him to find it? The chapter closed with Poirot sipping a fresh tisane, his eyes gleaming with determination. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the code was his. Chapter 2. The first clue. The rain pattered against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a rhythmic counterpoint to the crackling fire in the hearth. The room, with its polished mahogany furniture and neatly arranged bookshelves, exuded an air of order that mirrored Poirot's meticulous mind. He sat at his desk, the anonymous letteret's elegant script taunting him spread before him like a challenge carved in ink. The initials AC gleamed at the bottom, a silent dare from someone who believed they could outwit the great detective. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his intrigue, as he reread the cryptic words. The code lies hidden in plain sight, woven into the tales of murder and mystery. Only a mind as sharp as yours might unravel it. He leaned back, his fingers steepled, his eyes narrowing as he considered the audacity of the claim. A code within Agatha Christie's novels. The idea was preposterous, yet tantalizing. Christie's stories were masterpieces of misdirection, their plots as intricate as a Swiss watch. If a code existed, it would be a puzzle worthy of his intellect. But where to begin? The letter offered no specifics, only the vague assertion that the secret had eluded scholars and cryptographers for decades. Poirot's gaze drifted to his bookshelf, where a row of Christie's novels stood like sentinels guarding their secrets. He reached for the mysterious affair at Styles, the first of her works, began to read with a new purpose. The words flowed as they always had, vivid, precise, deceptively simple. But now, Poirot scrutinized each sentence, each phrase for anything out of place. Hours passed, the fire dwindling to embers, until a peculiar detail caught his eye. In the description of Captain Hastings' arrival at Styles Court, a single word, quixotic, stood out, its usage slightly forced, as if it didn't quite belong. Further on, in a dialogue between two minor characters, the phrase labyrinthine motives struck him as oddly poetic for their mundane exchange. These were not errors. Christie was too meticulous for that. They were anomalies, deliberate and subtle, like footprints in the snow. Poirot closed the book, his heart quickening. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "there is something here. A pattern, perhaps, but what does it signify?" He needed a second pair of eyes, someone trustworthy, yet unburdened by his own intensity. There was only one man for the job. The next morning, Captain Arthur Hastings arrived at Poirot's flat, his umbrella dripping from the relentless London drizzle. His face, weathered by years of adventure, yet softened by an enduring optimism, broke into a grin as Poirot greeted him at the door. "Poirot, old chap, you look like you've been up all night wrestling with a ghost," Hastings said, shaking off his coat. "What's this about? A mysterious letter?" "Sounds like something straight out of one of your cases." Poirot ushered him inside, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Not a ghost, Hastings, but a puzzle that may rival any we have faced." He handed Hastings the letter, watching as his friend's brow furrowed while reading. "Good heavens," Hastings said, setting the letter down. "A code in Agatha Christie's books. That's a bit fanciful, even for you. Do you think it's genuine? Genuine or not, mon ami, it has piqued the curiosity of Hercule Poirot," he replied, tapping his temple. "The little gray cells, they are awake, and already I have found irregularities in the mysterious affair at Styles. Words that do not belong, phrases that whisper of intent. But to confirm the pattern, I require your assistance." Hastings chuckled, settling into an armchair. "You know I'm game, Poirot, but where do we start? Christie wrote dozens of books, can't read them all, looking for odd words." "Precisement," Poirot said, pacing before the fire. "We must be systematic. I propose we focus on her most celebrated works first, those where her craft was at its peak. Murder on the Orient Express, for example. Its structure is impeccable, yet complex, perfect for concealing the code. You, Hastings, will catalog recurring motifs, names, places, objects, while I analyze the text for numerical or linguistic anomalies." Hastings nodded, already reaching for the novel from Poirot's shelf. "Right then. Let's get to it. But I warn you, if this turns out to be a wild goose chase, you owe me a decent bottle of claret." Poirot's mustache curled in a rare smile. "If we succeed, mon ami, I shall provide a case of the finest Bordeaux." The two men worked through the morning, the flat filled with the rustle of pages and the scratch of Hastings' pencil. Murder on the Orient Express unfolded before them, its tale of a snowbound train and a meticulously planned murder as captivating as ever. Hastings jotted down names: Ratchet, Arbuthnot, Mary Dibbin, came alongside locations like Istanbul and Calais. Poirot, meanwhile, pored over the text with a magnifying glass, his lips moving silently as he counted letters and words. It was just past noon when Poirot paused, his finger resting on a passage describing the train's departure from Istanbul. "Hastings," he said, his voice sharp with excitement, "regardus Checky. The name Ratchet. It appears precisely 13 times in the novel. And here, in this chapter, the word justice is repeated 5 times in a single paragraph. This is not coincidence." Hastings leaned over, squinting at the page. 13 and 5. Sounds like numbers a mathematician might care about, but what do they mean? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Numbers, mon ami, are the language of order. Let us consider the alphabet. If we assign each letter a number is 1, B is 2, and so forth. It says, name, RTCHGT, becomes 18, 1, 20, 3, 8, 5, 20. 20. Add them, 95 now. The word justice, Jakes, becomes 10, 21, 19, 29, 3, 5. Add them, 87, together. 95 and 87 give us 182. Hastings frowned, scratching his head. 182. Is that a page number? Exactamente, Poirot said, flipping to page 182 of the novel. Okay. And here we find the scene where Poirot reveals the solution to the murder. But look closer. Hastings. The first word of the page is truth, and it is italicized, an unusual choice for Christie's style. Hastings peered at the page, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. You're right. That is odd. But what does it mean? Truth isn't much of a clue, Poirot tapped. The book, alone, perhaps not, but consider the context. Murder on the Orient Express is a tale of collective justice. The number 182 may point us to another book, another page. Let us examine Christie's other works. Death on the Nile, perhaps it too, is a story of justice set in a confined space. Hastings groaned, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. You're dragging me into a literary treasure hunt, Poirot. Fine, let's try Death on the Nile. But if we're chasing numbers, we'll need more coffee. The afternoon blurred into evening as Poirot and Hastings delved into Death on the Nile, the novel's exotic setting. The sun-drenched Nile, the opulent steamer Carnac contrasted with the grim task of murder. Much like their current endeavor, Poirot's suspicion about the number 182 proved fruitful. On page 182 of Death on the Nile, they found a passage describing Lynette Doyle's cabin with a peculiar sentence. The river bent sharply, hiding the horizon from view. Poirot's breath caught. Mon Dieu, Hastings. The river bent. This is no coincidence. The words echoed the theme of concealment, just as the code is concealed. But what does it signify? Hastings leaned back, rubbing his eyes. River bending. Could it be a literal place? The Nile? Maybe? Or is it another metaphor for the code? Poirot paced, his mind racing. Perhaps both. The Nile is central to the story, but Christie was a master of layers. Let us examine the passage closely. The sentence has 9 words. We take the first letter of each word. Hastings scribbled quickly. Tigrvrb. That spells nothing. Patience, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. Let us try the alphabet again. Assign numbers to these letters. T is 20, H is 8, E is 5, and so on. Add them. Hastings calculated, his pencil flying. R total 107. Poirot flipped to page 107 of Death on the Nile. There, in the middle of a conversation between Poirot and a minor character, was a single underlined phrase in their copy of the book. The key lies where the river bends. The underlining was faint, almost invisible, but unmistakable. Good Lord, Poirot, Hastings exclaimed, nearly spilling his coffee. How did you know? And who underlined this? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Not I, Hastings. This copy is from my personal collection, untouched by others. The underlining suggests someone, perhaps the sender of the letter, has been here, or has access to my books. But the phrase itself, ain't, is the clue we seek. Hastings stared at the page, his excitement tempered by unease. So, what now? We've got a cryptic phrase about a river. Do we go to Egypt? Poirot smiled, a glint of determination in his eyes. Perhaps, mon ami. But first, we must understand the phrase. The key lies where the river bends. It may refer to a physical location, or it may be another layer of the code. We have uncovered the first clue, Hastings. and it is a triumph. But the puzzle is vast, and we have only begun. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the discovery settling over them. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls, as Poirot raised his glass of tisane. To progress, Hastings. And to the mind of Agatha Christie, which continues to challenge us. Hastings raised his coffee mug, grinning. To the chase, Poirot. And to that case of Bordeaux you promised. The days that followed were a whirlwind of analysis. Poirot and Hastings combed through death on the Nile, searching for further clues tied to the phrase. They cross-referenced maps of the Nile, noting every significant bend in the river. From Aswan to Luxor, Poirot, ever methodical, created a chart of recurring words in the novel, river, key, bend, and their positions. But no clear pattern emerged. The phrase remained elusive, a riddle wrapped in a mystery. One evening, as the rain gave way to a foggy London night, Poirot sat by the window, a copy of Death on the Nile open in his lap. Hastings, sprawled on the sofa, was halfway through cataloging character names from Murder on the Orient Express. Poirot, Casing said, breaking the silence. What if we're overthinking this? The phrase is so specific. Where the river bends. Maybe it's not about the Nile at all. Could it be a metaphor for something in Christie's life? She traveled a lot, didn't she? Okay. Poirot's eyes lit up. Okay. Mon ami, you may have stumbled upon something. Christie did indeed travel to Egypt, and her experiences there inspired Death on the Nile. Perhaps the clue points to a specific moment, a specific place. We must research her journeys. The next morning, they visited the British Library, where Poirot's charm and reputation secured access to a collection of Christie's travel journals. The librarian, a bespectacled woman with a passion for literary history, guided them to a set of leather-bound notebooks from Christie's 1930s expeditions. These are rarely requested, the librarian said, her voice tinged with awe. I come and go out, I get, I met her, I lie, I you, I'm Christie was meticulous, but her notes are often cryptic. Poirot's mustache twitched. Cryptic, you say? It's parfait. That is precisely what we seek. They spent hours poring over the journals, Hastings taking notes while Poirot read aloud passages about the Nile. One entry, dated February 1933, caught Poirot's attention. The river bends near Abu Simbel, where the sun reveals secrets in stone. I wonder if anyone will ever find what I've hidden there. Poirot closed the journal, his heart racing. Abu Simbel, Hastings, is a great temple carved into the rock. The river bends there, and Christie speaks of secrets. This cannot be coincidence. Hastings looked skeptical. She thinks she hid something at Abu Simbel. It's a bit far-fetched, even for her. Perhaps, Poirot conceded. Oh, clue is clear. We must investigate. If not a physical secret at Abu Simbel, then a literary one tied to that location. We return to Death on the Nile and search for references to Abu Simbel. Back at the flat, they found a passage describing a visit to the temple, where Poirot noticed another anomaly, a list of artifacts in Lenny Doyle's cabin, including a carved scarab that appeared nowhere else in the novel. The word scarab was italicized. Much like truth in Murder on the Orient Express. Another marker, Poirot said, his voice low with excitement. The scarab is a symbol of rebirth, of secrets preserved. We must count its letters, teams. Now, accustomed to Poirot's numerical obsession, calculated CRB 19, 3, 1, 18, 1, 2. Total 44. Page 44 of Death on the Nile described a conversation about ancient Egyptian myths with a single underlined sentence. The key lies where the river bends. The same phrase repeated as if to confirm their path. Poirot leaned back, his eyes alight with triumph. We are on the right track, Hastings. The code is real, and it spans Christie's works. This phrase is our guide, but its meaning remains hidden. We must prepare for a journey, mon ami, perhaps to Egypt, perhaps deeper into the novels. But for now, we celebrate this victory. They raised their glasses again, the fire casting a warm glow over the room. Outside, the fog thickened, shrouding London in mystery, much like the puzzle they pursued. Poirot's mind raced with possibilities, each clue a thread in a tapestry woven by Agatha Christie herself. The first clue was theirs, but the river's bend held secrets yet to be uncovered. Chapter 3. The River's Secret. Air was thick with the scent of sun-baked earth in the faint temps of the Nile as Hercule Poirot stepped off the steamer at Aswan. The river, a shimmering ribbon of silver under the Egyptian sun, wound through the landscape with a timeless grace. Its gentle bands, fringed with date palms and rocky outcrops, seemed to whisper secrets of a bygone era. Poirot adjusted his straw hat, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon, his mind alight with the cryptic phrase from Death on the Nile. The key lies where the river bends. It was a clue, he was certain, but one that demanded he tread the line between literature and reality. Beside him, Captain Hastings mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his face flushed from the heat. Say, Poirot, this is quite the adventure, he remarked, squinting at the bustling quay where merchants hawked their wares and tourists haggled over trinkets. But are we really to believe Agatha Christie hid a code in a place like this? It's all so exotic. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. Mon ami, the exotic is merely the familiar dressed in unfamiliar garb. Madame Christie was a master of misdirection. If she speaks of a river's bend, it is not mere poetry, it's precision. Must find the bend she intended. Their journey had begun days earlier in London, where Poirot's discovery of a numerical sequence in Murder on the Orient Express had led them to a specific page in Death on the Nile. The cryptic phrase on that page had ignited Poirot's curiosity, propelling them across continents to Egypt. The Nile, with its storied history and serpentine path, was no random choice. Christie had traveled here herself, her novels steeped in the mystique of this ancient land. Poirot felt the weight of her presence, as if her own little gray cells were guiding him toward the truth. Their first stop was a small, sun-bleached cafe overlooking the river. The proprietor, a wiry man named Mahmoud with a quick smile, served them mint tea in delicate glasses. Poirot, ever observant, noted the man's calloused hands and the way his eyes darted toward the river whenever a boat passed. Monsieur, Mahmoud Poirot began, his tone genial but probing. You know this river well. Tell me, is there a place nearby where the Nile bends sharply, perhaps a place of significance? Mahmoud hesitated, his fingers tightening around a tray. Many bends in the Nile, Fendi, he said cautiously, but there is one near the old temple of Philae, where the river turns like a snake. The locals call it the serpent's coil. They say it is a place of secrets. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Secrets, you say? And what manner of secrets might one find there? Mahmoud shrugged, but his gaze flickered toward a group of men seated in the corner, their voices low, and their faces shadowed by kaffirs. Old stories, he said vaguely. Tales of hidden treasures, lost manuscripts. Tourists love such nonsense. Poirot sipped his tea, his mind cataloging the man's evasiveness. Merci, Monsieur Mahmoud. You have been most illuminating. As they left the cafe, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "Our friend knows more than he shares. It's a serpent's coil. Hastings, this is where we begin." The journey to Falais was a short one. Aboard a felucca, piloted by a young man named Amr, whose easy grin belied a sharp intelligence. The boat glided over the Nile's glassy surface, the ruins of the ancient temple rising like a mirage against the desert sky. As they approached the serpent's coil, Poirot's attention was drawn to a cluster of rocks jutting from the riverbank, their shapes oddly symmetrical, as if carved by human hands. "Amr," Poirot called, pointing to the rocks. "What are these formations? They seem unusual." Amr's grin faded slightly. "They are old Effendi. Some say they mark a sacred place, a shrine to the river gods. Others say they hide something not meant to be found." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Not meant to be found, you say? Then it is precisely what Hercule Poirot must find." Disembarking, Poirot and Hastings explored the rocky outcrop. The stones were weathered, etched with faint hieroglyphs that time had nearly erased. Poirot knelt, his fingers tracing the grooves, his mind racing. "Hastings, observe," he said, pointing to a symbol resembling an ankh crossed with a quill. "This is no ancient relic. It is a Madonna mark left by someone who wished to be found, but only by those who seek with purpose." Hastings frowned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You think Christie herself left this tie here, of all places? Because mon ami the Nile was her muse. She wrote of murder and mystery here, and she wove her secrets into the very landscape." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he scanned the rocks. "There is something hidden here. A compartment, perhaps, or a marker." For hours they searched, the sun climbing higher, the heat relentless. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, grumbled but persisted, tapping stones and probing crevices. Just as the light began to fade, Poirot's fingers brushed against a slab that felt unnaturally smooth. He pressed, and with a soft click, the stone shifted, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside was a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges frayed, but its cover embossed with the initials AC. Poirot's heart quickened. "Monsieur Hastings, we have found it." Back at their hotel in Aswan, Poirot opened the notebook under the glow of a lamp. Its pages were filled with cryptic symbols, letters, numbers, and strange glyphs arranged in no apparent order. "A substitution cipher," Poirot murmured, his fingers drumming the table. But one of fiendish complexity. Madame Christie was no amateur. Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Can you crack it, old chap?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Crack it, Hastings. I shall dance with it until it yields its secrets." The cipher consumed Poirot's attention through the night. He tried various keys: Christie's name, the titles of her novels, even the names of her detectives. At dawn, inspiration struck. Recalling the numerical sequence from Murder on the Orient Express, he applied it as a key, shifting each letter by a corresponding value. Slowly, the symbols resolved into words, and a single word emerged. Marple. Poirot leaned back, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "Marple," he repeated softly. The code spans not only Poirot's world, but Miss Marple's as well. Madame Christie has woven a tapestry that connects her to great detectives. Hastings blinked, astonished. "Miss Marple. But what does it mean?" "It means, mon ami, that the next clue lies in the world of St. Mary Mead. The river has given us its secret. But the journey is far from over." Their celebration was interrupted by a knock at the door. A young woman stood there, her dark eyes wide with urgency. "Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her accent tinged with French. "I am Noor, a historian. Heard you were asking about the serpent's coil. You must be careful. There are those who guard its secret sand. They do not welcome outsiders." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And who, mademoiselle, might these guardians be?" Noor hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "They call themselves the keepers of the quill. They believe Christie's code protects something sacred. They will stop at nothing to keep it hidden." As Noor slipped away into the night, Poirot's mind raced. The keepers of the quillin, echo of the secret society he would later uncover. For now, the notebook and its single word, marble, were enough. The river had yielded its secret, but the path ahead was fraught with danger and mystery. Poirot felt a surge of exhilaration, his little gray cells humming with anticipation. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot was determined to see it through. The journey to the serpent's coil had not been without its challenges. Earlier that day, as they approached the site, Poirot had noticed a man trailing them from the quay, tall figure in a linen suit, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The man had lingered at a distance, watching as they explored the rocks. Poirot had said nothing to Hastings, not wishing to alarm him. But his instincts told him they were not alone in their quest. Now, in the quiet of their hotel room, Poirot turned the notebook over in his hands. Its leather was worn, but the stitching was intact, suggesting it had been carefully preserved. The cipher's complexity hinted at Christie's own intellect, a mind that delighted in puzzles as much as Poirot did. He imagined her sitting by the Nile, pen in hand, crafting a code that would outlive her, a challenge for those bold enough to seek it. "Hastings," Poirot said, breaking the silence, "we must return to England. St. Mary Mead awaits, and, with it, the next piece of the puzzle. But we must be cautious. The keepers of the quill are watching." Hastings nodded, his expression resolute. "Right, Poirot, let's get to it. But I must say, this is the most extraordinary treasure hunt I've ever been on." Poirot chuckled softly. "Treasure, Hastings, perhaps. But I suspect the true treasure is the mind of Agatha Christie herself, a mind that continues to challenge us, even from beyond the grave." As they prepared to leave Aswan, Poirot cast one last glance at the Nile, its waters catching the first light of dawn. The river had given up one secret, but it held others still, whispering in its ceaseless flow. For now, Poirot was content, his curiosity sated by the notebook and its cryptic word. The mystery was unfolding, each clue a step closer to the truth, and Hercule Poirot was ready for whatever lay ahead. Chapter 4. The Village Connection. Hercule Poirot adjusted his perfectly knotted tie as the train rattled through the English countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the whirl of thoughts in his mind. The rolling hills, dappled with late summer light, stretched endlessly beyond the window. But Poirot's attention was fixed inward on the cryptic clue from the Nile. Marble. The word had ignited a spark in his little gray cells, pointing him toward the fictional village of St. Mary Mead, and, he suspected, its real-world inspiration. Beside him, Captain Hastings scribbled in a notebook, his brow furrowed as he catalogued their findings from Egypt. "Poirot," Hastings said, glancing up, "do you really think this village St. Mary Mead, of all places, holds the next piece of the puzzle? It's just a quaint little spot in Christie's stories, isn't it?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "My Namie, in the works of Madame Christie, nothing is just anything. It's a village. It is a stage, and on that stage, she has hidden something for us to find. It's a clue. Marble. It is not an accident. It is a beacon." The train slowed, and the conductor's voice announced their stop. Danimouth. It's the nearest station to the village Poirot believed served as the model for St. Mary Mead. He had spent the journey cross-referencing Christie's novels, letters, and biographies, narrowing down the location to a cluster of hamlets in Devon, Dannemouth. With its proximity to the coast and its history of literary visitors, felt like the right choice. Poirot's intuition, honed by years of unraveling mysteries, hummed with certainty as they stepped onto the platform. The air carried the scent of salt and wildflowers. The station was small, its single bench occupied by an elderly woman feeding pigeons. She glanced at them with sharp, curious eyes before returning to her task. Poirot tipped his hat politely, but his mind was already racing toward the village. They hired a car, modest Austin, with a driver who seemed bemused by their destination, and set off toward the hamlet of Chipping St. Mary, which Poirot had deduced was the likely counterpart to St. Mary Mead. The road wound through hedgerows and past stone walls, a landscape exuding a quiet charm that belied the secrets Poirot suspected it held. Hastings, ever the optimist, chatted about the beauty of the countryside, but Poirot remained silent, his eyes scanning every detail: a crooked signpost, a weathered gate, a distant church spire piercing the sky. The village itself was a postcard of English pastoral life: thatched cottages, a post office with a red door, and a green where children played cricket. The driver dropped them at the Blue Boar Inn, a half-timber-built building with ivy clinging to its walls. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of freshly baked bread and ale. The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Harrow, greeted them with a warm smile. "Welcome, gentlemen," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Not many visitors this time of year. Come for the scenery, have you?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not precisely, madame. We are here on a matter of literary interest. Tell me, is there a library in this village, or perhaps a collection of rare books?" Mrs. Harrow's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. "A library? Oh, we've got the reading room just off the green. Small mind, you, but old Mr. Pennington keeps it stocked. He's a bit of a collector, especially of those detective stories." "You'll find him there most days," Mercy Poirot said, bowing slightly. "You have been most helpful." They left the inn. Hastings muttered, "A library. Poirot, you're not seriously thinking the next clue is in some dusty village reading room?" "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice calm but firm. "The mind of Agatha Christie, it is like a tapestry. Every thread has purpose. If she has pointed us to St. Mary Mead, then here, in this village, we will find the next thread." The reading room was a modest stone building with a sagging roof and a sign that read, "Chipping St. Mary Literary Society." Inside, the air was cool and musty, the shelves lined with books of every size and condition. Sunlight streamed through a single stained glass window, casting a mosaic of colors across the wooden floor. Behind a cluttered desk sat Mr. Pennington, a wiry man in his 70s with spectacles perched on the tip of his nose. He looked up as they entered, his expression a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Good afternoon," Poirot said, his tone polished. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. We are scholars of literature, seeking a particular volume of first edition of The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie. Have you such a treasure in your collection?" De Pennington's eyes narrowed. "Agatha Christie, eh? Popular enough, but first editions are rare. Why that book in particular?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice dropped into a conspiratorial whisper. "Let us say, monsieur, that it holds special significance. A matter of intellectual curiosity." The old man studied Poirot for a moment, then rose with a creak of joints. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into a back room. Hastings shot Poirot a skeptical look, but Poirot merely tapped his temple, signaling confidence. When Mr. Pennington returned, he carried a slim volume bound in faded green cloth. "This is it," he said, placing it on the desk. First edition, 1930. Been in the collection since my father ran this place. Not many ask for it. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the embossed title, his heart quickening. He opened the book, his eyes scanning the pages with practiced precision. At first, nothing seemed imminent until he reached the third chapter. There, in the margins, faint pencil marks formed a series of seemingly random words: vicar, clock, garden, mirror. Each was written in a precise, elegant hand, unlike the scrawl of a casual reader. Hastings, Poirot murmured. Do you see? These annotations, they are not the work of a careless reader. They're deliberate. Hastings peered over his shoulder. A code, you think? Decipherment, Poirot said. But to unravel it, we must think as Madame Christie did. These words, they are pieces of a puzzle. We must find how they fit. For the next hour, Poirot and Hastings sat at a corner table, the book open before them. Poirot jotted down the annotated words, arranging and rearranging them. He tried anagrams, acrostics, and substitution ciphers, but none yielded a clear result. Frustration began to creep in, though Poirot's expression remained serene. Then inspiration struck. Hastings, he said, his voice sharp with excitement. The words themselves, they are not the message. They are markers. Look at the first letter of each. V, C, G, M. These initials, they correspond to elements. In the story, the vicar, the clock, the garden, the mirror. But what if they also point to something physical, here in this village? Hastings frowned. You mean the actual vicarage? Or a clock in the village? Poirot's eyes sparkled. Exactament. We must explore Chipping St. Mary, for the village itself may be the cipher's key. They thanked Mr. Pennington, who seemed reluctant to let the book out of his sight, and stepped back into the afternoon sun. The village was quiet, save for the distant laughter of children and the chirping of sparrows. Poirot led the way to the church, a gray stone structure with a squat tower. Beside it stood the vicarage, a charming house with roses climbing its walls. First, the vicar, Poirot said. They knocked, and a kindly woman answered Mrs. Latham, the vicar's wife. She invited them in, intrigued by their interest in local history. Inside, the parlor was cozy, with a grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Poirot's gaze fixed on the clock. Madame, this clock, it is a fine piece. Has it been here long? Oh yes, Mrs. Latham said. It's been in the vicarage since the 1920s, a gift from a visiting writer, they say. She was quite fond of the village. Poirot's pulse quickened. A writer? Might her initials have been a C? Mrs. Latham's eyes widened. Why, yes. Agatha Christie stayed here briefly, before my time, of course. The clock was her gift, or so the story goes. Poirot examined the clock, its polished wood gleaming. On the pendulum's base, he spotted a faint engraving. C.G.M. Hastings, he whispered. The initials clock, garden, mirror. The next clue is here. With Mrs. Latham's permission, they searched the vicarage's garden, a neatly tended plot with a stone bench and a small fountain. Near the fountain, half hidden by ivy, was a cracked mirror mounted on a wall. Poirot ran his fingers along its frame, feeling for irregularities. A soft click sounded, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a small, dust-covered notebook. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed, lifting it carefully. The notebook bore the initials AC and contained a single page of text, a grid of letters, like a crossword without clues. At the bottom was a note. The vicar's sermon holds the truth. Hastings stared at the grid. Another cipher, Poirot. This is getting complicated. Complicated, yes, Poirot said, but not impossible. The sermon, it must refer to something in the murder at the vicarage. We return to the text, Hastings, but first, we must solve this grid. Back at the Blue Boar Inn, they settled into A quiet corner of the dining room, the notebook open before them. The grid was a 5x5 square, each cell containing a letter. Poirot recognized it as a Playfair cipher, a favorite of cryptographers. Using the keyword vicar, he began decoding the grid, his pencil moving swiftly. After several minutes, the letters resolved into a string. 51 Wilton Road, London, an address. Hastings exclaimed. In London, Poirot said, leaning back with a satisfied smile. The trail leads us to the city. But first, we must confirm the sermon's role. In the murder at the vicarage, the vicar's sermon is mentioned, in passing, but it speaks of truth and deception. Perhaps it is a metaphor for the code itself, truth hidden in plain sight. That evening, they dined on roast lamb and potatoes, the inn's fire crackling warmly. Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities, but a nagging doubt lingered. The address 51 Wilton Road felt too precise, too easy. Was it a destination or another layer of the puzzle? He resolved to visit the site with caution, aware that Christie's mind was as cunning as his own. The next morning, they boarded a train to London, the notebook tucked safely in Poirot's valise. The countryside gave way to the cities. Sprawl, Hastings leaned toward him. Poirot, what do you think we'll find at this address? Another book? A person? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Dat mon ami" is the question. But rest assured, whatever awaits us, it will bring us closer to the heart of Madame Christie's secret. And Hercule Poirot does not fail when the truth is at stake. The train pulled into Paddington Station, and they hailed a taxi to Wilton Road. The address led them to a narrow street lined with Georgian buildings, their facades weathered but elegant. Number 51 was a bookshop, its sign faded but legible. Wilton's Rare Books. The windows were dark, the door locked, and the closed sign hung crookedly. Poirot tested the door, finding it unyielding. Curious, he murmured. A bookshop. Abandoned yet not. Hastings, we must gain entry. The next clue awaits. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, Poirot felt a thrill of anticipation. The village had yielded its secret, but the bookshop promised a new chapter in the mystery, one that would test his intellect as never before. With a determined nod, he set to work, ready to unlock the next piece of Agatha Christie's enigmatic code. Chapter 5. The Bookshop Ciphered. Fog clung to the London streets like a conspirator, veiling the city in a haze that muffled footsteps and blurred the edges of reality. Hercule Poirot, his silver-tipped cane tapping a rhythm against the cobblestones, stood before the abandoned bookshop at the address uncovered in St. Mary Mead. The building was a relic of another time. Key, its faded sign, reading quill and ink, barely legible under layers of grime. The windows, clouded with dust, stared back like unseeing eyes, and the door, slightly ajar, creaked in the damp breeze. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, shifted uncomfortably at Poirot's side, his breath visible in the chill air. "This place gives me the shivers," Poirot, Hastings muttered, adjusting his scarf. "Looks like it hasn't been touched since Queen Victoria's day." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mon ami, appearances are but the costume of truth. This bookshop, it is not abandoned, is waiting." He pushed the door open, the bell above jingling faintly, as if startled by their intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and mildew. Shelves loomed like silent sentinels, their books sagging under the weight of neglect. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the grimy windows. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail: the warped floorboards, the cobwebs draping the chandelier, the faint outline of footprints in the dust, leading to a corner. He adjusted his gloves, his movements deliberate, as if the act of observation were a sacred ritual. "Hastings, observe," Poirot said, pointing to the footprints. They are recent. No? The dust, it is disturbed, but not yet resettled. Someone has been here, and not long ago. Hastings squinted at the tracks, his brow furrowing. Could be a vagrant, Poirot, or a looter. This place looks ripe for picking. Poirot shook his head, his voice low but firm. Nan, this is no random trespass. The one who walked here had purpose. We must find what they sought. They followed the footprints to a small alcove at the back of the shop, where a portrait hung askew on the wall. It depicted a woman with piercing eyes and a knowing smile, her features strikingly familiar. Poirot tilted his head, studying the canvas. Agatha Christie, he murmured, his voice tinged with reverence. The Queen of Mystery herself. Hastings raised an eyebrow. A portrait of Christie in a dusty old bookshop. That's a bit on the nose, don't you think? Poirot's eyes gleamed. On the nose, perhaps, but not without reason. This portrait, it is no mere decoration. He ran his fingers along the frame, feeling for irregularities. A soft click echoed in the silence, and the portrait swung forward, revealing a small safe embedded in the wall. The safe was old but sturdy, its dial gleaming faintly in the dim light. Good heavens, Poirot! Hastings exclaimed. How did you know? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The mind of Poirot, it is attuned to the patterns of human cunning. The portrait, it is too perfectly placed to deliberately askew. Now, let us see what secrets this safe conceals. He turned his attention to the dial, recalling the numerical sequence they had uncovered in Murder on the Orient Express, a series of numbers derived from character names and locations, meticulously mapped to the alphabet. The sequence was 128193. Poirot spun the dial with precision, each click resonating like a heartbeat in the quiet shop. After the final number, the safe gave a satisfying clunk, and the door swung open. Inside lay a small bundle of letters, tied with a faded red ribbon, and a single book, a first edition of, and then there were none. The letters were written in a neat, flowing script addressed to an unknown recipient and signed with the initials AC. Poirot's heart quickened as he untied the ribbon and began to read. The letters spoke of a literary treasure hidden within Christie's novels, a secret so profound it was meant to be guarded by only the most discerning minds. One passage caught his eye. The treasure is not gold nor jewels, but something far greater, a truth woven into the fabric of my stories. Seek it in the tale where 10 fall, where justice is both cruel and inevitable. 10 fall, Hastings repeated, his voice hushed. That's, and then there were none, isn't it? The 10 victims on the island. Precisement, Poirot said, holding up the book. This edition, it is the key. But to what lock? He opened the book, its pages yellowed but intact, and began to examine it closely. The text seemed ordinary at first, but Poirot's keen eye noticed something peculiar. Certain page numbers were faintly underlined in pencil, almost imperceptible, unless viewed at an angle. Hastings, fetch me a pencil and paper, Poirot instructed. We must record these numbers. Hastings rummaged through his pockets, producing a small notebook and pencil. Poirot listed the underlined page numbers: 5, 12, 19, 26, 33, 40, 47, 54, 61, 68. 10 numbers, he mused. A pattern, perhaps a cipher. But what kind? He studied the numbers, his mind racing through cryptographic techniques. The sequence didn't match a simple substitution or transposition cipher. Then an idea struck him. The Polybius square. Mon ami. A grid of letters, 5 by 5, where numbers correspond to coordinates. Hastings looked puzzled. Polybius square. Never heard of it. Poirot sketched a grid in the notebook, labeling the rows and columns with numbers 1 to 5 and filling the squares with the alphabet, omitting the letter J to fit the 25 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. A, B, C, D, E, 2, F, G, H, I, K, 3, L, M, N, O, P, 4. Q, R, S, T, U, 5, V, W, X, Y, Z. Each pair of numbers represents a letter, Poirot explained. The first number is the row, the second is the column. Let us decode. He paired the page numbers, 5 to 1, 2 to 1, 9 to 1, 2 to 6, 3 to 3, 4 to 0, 4 to 7, 5 to 4, 6 to 1, 6 to 8. Adjusting for the grid, he realized the numbers needed to be split differently, as some were two-digit. After trial and error, he settled on a correct pairing based on the book structure: 0501, 1201, 1901, 2601, 3301, 6801. Using the Polybius square, he decoded 0501, V1201, F1901, I. Since J is omitted, 2601, I 3301, N 4001, Q 4701, U 5401, Y 6101, invalid. Adjusted to 621, assuming a misprint, a 6821, invalid. Adjusted to 628, assuming a misprint. I's letters, spelled V-F-I-N-Q-U-Y-A-I. Poirot frowned. This is not a word, but perhaps an anagram. He rearranged the letters, his mind working like a kaleidoscope, until a chilling phrase emerged. Find Ki. Find Ki. Hastings repeated, baffled. What's that supposed to mean? Poirot's eyes narrowed. K. It is a wharf, a place by the water. But it could be a person, a place, or a number. Roman numerals, perhaps. Key 1, a specific location. Hastings scratched his head. A key in London. There's dozens along the Thames. But we must think like Christie, Poirot said. The clue is tied to, and then there were none. The island, the isolation, the inevitability of justice. Perhaps Ki refers to a specific dock, one with literary significance. Poirot flipped through the letters again, searching for further hints. One letter mentioned a meeting at the quay where the tide turns, a poetic phrase that resonated with Christie's style. He recalled a detail from their research. Christie had once stayed at a hotel near St. Catherine Docks, a historic quay near the Tower of London. Could quay be a reference to the first quay in that dock system? We must go to St. Catherine Docks, Poirot declared. There we may find the next piece of the puzzle. As they prepared to leave, the bookshop seemed to shift around them. A floorboard creaked in the distance, not from their movements. Hastings froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver he no longer carried. Poirot, did you hear that? Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. We, mon ami, we are not alone. They moved silently toward the sound, which came from a back room. Pushing open the door, they found a figure hunched over a desk, scribbling furiously. The man, elderly and disheveled, looked up with wild eyes. You, he gasped, clutching a notebook. You're after the code, aren't you? Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Sire, I am Hercule Poirot. Who are you, and what do you know of this code? The man's hands trembled. I'm just a keeper. One of the last, daughter of the quill, entrusted me to watch this place. But you've found the safe, haven't you? You're closer than anyone's ever been. The Order of the Quill. Poirot pressed. What is its purpose? The man shook his head, his voice dropping to a whisper. To protect her secret. Christie's truth. It's bigger than you know. But beware, 10 will fall before the truth rises. Hastings gasped. That's the message from the cipher. The old man's eyes widened. You've decoded it? Then you're in danger. They're watching, always watching. Before Poirot could ask more, the man bolted, knocking over a stack of books and disappearing through a back door into the fog. Poirot and Hastings gave chase, but the man vanished into the labyrinth of alleys. Breathing heavily, Hastings turned to Poirot. Who was that? And who's they? Poirot's face was grim. I do not know, mon ami, but I suspect the Order of the Quill is not merely a literary society. There is something sinister at play. We must proceed to St. Catherine Docks with caution. As they stepped back into the fog, Poirot clutched the letters and the book tightly. The cipher had yielded a clue, but it had also unleashed a shadow. The thrill of discovery was tempered by a growing unease, a sense that the code was not just a game but a gauntlet, one that might lead to truths more dangerous than he had imagined. The key awaited, and with it, the next chapter of Agatha Christie's enigma. The journey to St. Catherine Docks was a study in contrasts. London's bustle clashed with the fog's oppressive silence, and Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The docks, a maze of warehouses and quays reborn as a modern marina, still held echoes of their Victorian past. Quay 1, the first in the dock system, was a narrow strip of stone flanked by yachts and the restless Thames. Poirot scanned the area, his eyes lingering on a weathered plaque commemorating the dock's history. Hastings, look here, he said, pointing to the plaque. It mentions a restoration project in 1927, the year Christie published the Big Four. A coincidence, perhaps, but Poirot does not believe in coincidences. They searched the quay, their footsteps echoing against the water. Near the end of the quay, Poirot noticed a small, rusted grate embedded in the stone, barely noticeable, unless one was looking for it. Kneeling, he examined it closely. The grate was loose, and beneath it lay a small metal box, its surface etched with the initials A.C. Monjour. Poirot whispered, his heart racing. Like a tea, he pried open the box, revealing a single sheet of paper handwritten note in Christie's unmistakable script. Key, it read, the tide turns, and so does the tale. Seek the 10 who guard the truth, for their shadows point to the heart of my design. Hastings read over his shoulder, his voice trembling with excitement. 10 again. It's got to be. And then there were none. But what's this about shadows? Poirot folded the note carefully, his mind alight with theories. The shadows, mon ami, are the 10 victims of the novel, each a piece of the puzzle. Their deaths, their stories, they conceal a deeper truth. We must return to the book and examine it anew. As they left the quay, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping them in its embrace. Poirot felt a chill that had little to do with the weather. The cipher had led them here, but the old man's warning echoed in his mind. Who was watching? And what was the truth Christie had hidden so carefully? The bookshop had yielded its secret, but the mystery was far from solved. Poirot's little gray cells burned with determination, ready to unravel the next thread in Agatha Christie's intricate tapestry. Chapter 6. The 10 shadows. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over London, bathing the city in a warm glow that belied the chill of autumn. Hercule Poirot sat in his impeccably tidy flat at Whitehaven Mansions, his fingers steepled before him, his sharp green eyes fixed on a first edition of And Then There Were None. The book lay open on his polished mahogany desk, its pages yellowed but pristine, as if time itself had bowed to Poirot's insistence on order. Beside it rested a neatly handwritten list of 10 letters, each meticulously extracted from the novel's text, corresponding to the order of the victims' deaths. The letters, when arranged, spelled out a single, tantalizing phrase: British Museum. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Mon Dieu, Madame Christie, you are a clever one, he murmured, his Belgian accent softening the edges of his words. The cryptic message from the bookshop safe tin will fall before the truth rises head, gnawed at him since its discovery. Now, this new clue felt like a beacon, pulling him deeper into the labyrinth of Agatha Christie's hidden code. T leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly, let his little gray sails hum with anticipation. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, bustled into the room, his face flushed from the brisk walk back from the corner tobacconist. He carried a small parcel under his arm, which he set down with a thud. "Poirot, old chap, I've been thinking," he began, unwinding his scarf. "This whole business with the bookshop and that chilling message, 10 will fall, it's got to be tied to, and then there were none, hasn't it? I mean, 10 victims, 10 letters. It's too neat to be coincidence." Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Hastings, my friend, you state the obvious with such enthusiasm. It is almost endearing. The connection is clear. The 10 victims of Madame Christie's Island have given us their secret, the British Museum. But what awaits us there? That is the question that stirs the mind of Hercule Poirot." Hastings frowned, scratching his head. "The British Museum. It's a bit public, isn't it? I mean, if there's a secret code, why point to a place crawling with tourists and scholars?" "Precisely because it is public, mon ami," Poirot replied, rising from his chair with a fluid grace. "The secret, hidden in plain sight, is the most difficult to uncover. Come, we shall visit this museum and see what Madame Christie has left." For us, the British Museum loomed before them, its grand neoclassical facade, a monument to human knowledge and curiosity. Inside, the air was cool and heavy, with the scent of old stone and polished wood. The great court bustled with visitors, their voices echoing off the tessellated glass ceiling. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat and polished shoes, moved through the crowd with the precision of a man who knew exactly where he was going, even if he didn't yet know what he was looking for. Hastings trailed behind, his eyes darting from one exhibit to another, half expecting a clue to leap out from a display case. "Poirot, where do we even start?" Hastings whispered, glancing at a towering statue of an Egyptian pharaoh. "This place is enormous." "The clue said British Museum, but that's not exactly specific." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Patience, Hastings. The clue is precise. In its own way, Madame Christie does not waste words. We must think as she thought, literary, symbolic, deliberate. The 10 letters led us here, and so we must seek something connected to, and then there were none nor, perhaps, to the number 10 itself." They wandered through the galleries, Poirot's keen eyes scanning every detail, the Rosetta Stone, the Elgin marbles, the intricate Assyrian reliefs. He paused occasionally, his head tilted, as if listening to an inner voice, but nothing seemed to catch his attention until they reached the reading room, a circular sanctuary of knowledge now open to select visitors. The room's domed ceiling and rows of leather-bound books exuded an air of quiet reverence. And Poirot's expression brightened. "Voila, Hastings," he said softly. "This is a place where secrets might linger. A library within a museum, a fitting stage for Madame Christie's game." They approached the librarian's desk, where a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from a ledger. His nameplate read Mr. Edmund Carver. Poirot introduced himself with his usual flourish, his card held delicately between 2 fingers. "Monsieur Carver, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings. We are investigating a matter of some delicacy connected to the works of Madame Agatha Christie. Have you, perhaps, any special collections or manuscripts related to her writings?" Carver blinked, adjusting his spectacles. "Agatha Christie? Well, that's an unusual request. We don't have any of her original manuscripts on public display, but—" He hesitated, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "There is something A few years ago, we received a donation of rare manuscript said to be linked to her. It's not cataloged, mind you, kept in the restricted archives. A bit of an oddity, really? Poirot's interest sharpened. An oddity, you say? See it? Carver hesitated, then nodded. I'll need to check with the curator, but I suppose it's harmless enough. Wait here. As Carver disappeared into the back, Hastings leaned close. Poirot, do you think this is it? It's the next piece of the puzzle? Perhaps, Hastings. Poirot replied, his voice low. But we must be cautious. Madame Christie's code is not merely a puzzle, it is a story. And every story has its twists. Carver returned, clutching a slim, leather-bound folder. He led them to a private reading alcove, where he carefully opened it to reveal a handwritten manuscript. Up the title page bore the words, "A Study in Shadows," in Christie's distinctive script, followed by her initials, A.C. Poirot's breath caught as he traced the letters with a gloved finger. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "This is no ordinary manuscript." The pages were filled with elegant handwriting, but what caught Poirot's eye was an acrostic poem woven into the margins. Each line began with a bolded letter, and when read downward, they formed a phrase. 10 minds guard the truth. Poem itself was a cryptic ode to justice, betrayal, and hidden knowledge. Its verses filled with imagery of shadows and secrets. Hastings read over Poirot's shoulder, his brow furrowed. 10 minds. What does that mean? Is it another reference to the 10 victims? No, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice vibrant with excitement. This is something more. The 10 minds are not fictional characters. They are real. A group, perhaps, who knew of Madame Christie's code and swore to protect it. We must uncover who they were. Carver, hovering nearby, cleared his throat. If I may, Mr. Poirot, there's a note at the back of the manuscript. It mentions a meeting, dated 1939, held here in the reading room. Something about a literary society. Poirot flipped to the final page, where a brief note in Christie's hand read, "The order met on the eve of war. 10 minds bound by a vow. The truth lies where their shadows fall." The order, Poirot mused. A literary society, Pater. But why hide such a secret in a manuscript? And why point us here? He turned to Carver. "Monsieur, are there records of literary societies that met here in 1939? Carver nodded. The reading room was a hub for intellectuals back then. I can check the archives, but it'll take time. Names, dates, that sort of thing, it's all buried in old ledgers. Then we shall wait, Poirot said firmly, but not idly. Hastings, we must examine this poem further. Its words are the key to the next step. For the next hours, Poirot and Hastings pored over the manuscript, the acrostic poem becoming their obsession. The verse spoke of shadows cast by 10, each line hinting at a different role. The poet, scholar, the judge, the dreamer, and so on. Poirot began to suspect that these were not just metaphors, but descriptions of real individuals, each contributing to the safeguarding of Christie's code. As dusk settled over London, Carver returned with a dusty ledger. "Found something," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. In 1939, a group called the Order of the Quill met here regularly, 10 members, all prominent in literary or academic circles. There's a list of names, but it's incomplete. Some are just initials. Date. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he took the ledger. The names were a mix of the familiar and the obscure. Dorothy L. Sayers, a fellow mystery writer. Dr. Evelyn Hargrove, a cryptographer. Sir Thomas Wren, a barrister. And 7 others, some listed only as initials. One entry caught Poirot's eye, a sea scribe and keeper. Madame Christie herself, Poirot said, his voice reverent. She was one of the 10. This Order of the Quill, they were her confidants, her allies in this grand game. Hastings leaned forward. But what were they guarding? It's a poem. Mentions truth, But what truth? And why hide it in her novels? Poirot closed the ledger, his mind racing. That Hastings is what we must discover. The poem speaks of shadows, and shadows are cast by light. We must find where the light of these 10 minds fell, where their work converged. Carver, still lingering, piped up. There's one more. Think. The ledger mentions a donation from the order, stored in the museum's vaults. A box, sealed, with instructions not to open it unless presented with a specific key. It's still there, as far as I know. Poirot's heart quickened. A key, you say? And where might this key be? Carver shrugged. No idea. The records only say it was entrusted to the scribe's heir. The scribe's heir, Poirot repeated, his mind whirling. Madame Christie, the scribe, had no children, but perhaps an heir in spirit to literary successor, or someone close to her. We must find this heir. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings set out to track down the order of the Quill's surviving members, or their descendants. Their first lead was Dorothy L. Sayers, whose sharp wit and detective novels made her a likely candidate for Christie's inner circle. Poirot's inquiries led them to a small publishing house in Oxford, where Sayers had once worked as an editor. The current owner, a sprightly woman named Clara Henshaw, greeted them with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. You're saying Dorothy was part of some secret society? Clara asked, her eyes wide behind round glasses. That's quite a tale, Mr. Poirot. Not a tale, Madame Henshaw, Poirot replied, his tone earnest. A truth hidden in the shadows of history. Did Mademoiselle Sayers ever speak of a group called the Order of the Quill, or of a key entrusted phoenix-like to be passed down? Clara frowned, then rummaged through a cluttered desk. Oh, there's this, she said, producing a small, locked diary embossed with the initials DLs. It came with the business when I bought it. Never could open it, needs a key, and no one's ever found it. Poirot's pulse quickened. May I? Clara handed him the diary, and Poirot examined the lacquer delicate mechanism, engraved with a tiny quill. This is no ordinary diary, he said. It may hold the answers we seek, but the key, mon Dieu, where is the key? Hastings, ever practical, suggested. Could it be literal? A physical key, hidden in one of Christie's novels, like the manuscript in the museum. Poirot nodded slowly. You may be right, Hastings. The poem spoke of shadows, and the ledger of a key we must return to, and then there were none, perhaps. The clue lies not in the letters, but in the spaces between them. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot reopened the novel, his fingers tracing the lines of the acrostic poem from the museum manuscript. He noticed something new. The poem's structure mirrored the nursery rhyme from "And Then There Were None," with 10 lines corresponding to the 10 deaths. Each line, when cross-referenced with the novel's text, highlighted a specific word. Together, these words formed a sentence. The key rests with the poet's heir. The poet's heir, Poirot said, his voice alight with revelation. Dorothy L. Sayers was known for her poetry as well as her prose. The key to her diary must be with her AirPods, a literary protege, or a family member. A quick call to Clara Henshaw revealed that Sayers had no direct descendants, but her literary estate had passed to a distant cousin, Margaret Sayers, who lived in a quiet village near Bath. Poirot and Hastings boarded a train that very evening, the countryside blurring past as Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. Margaret Sayers was a frail woman in her 70s, her cottage filled with books and faded photographs. She listened to Poirot's tale with growing astonishment, her hands trembling as she poured tea. A key from Dorothy, she said. I do have something. A small box she left me, with instructions never to open it unless asked by one who knows the shadows. Poirot's eyes sparkled. Madame, I am that one. Margaret retrieved a wooden box, its lid carved with a quill. Inside was a tiny brass key, its bow shaped like a feather. Poirot held it up, the lamplight glinting off its surface. Voila, the key to the scribe's ear. Now we return to Oxford. At the publishing house, Poirot inserted the key into the diary's lock. Turned with a satisfying click, revealing pages filled with Sayre's elegant script of the entries. Detailed the order of the quill's meetings. Their purpose clear: to protect a philosophical treatise Christie had written, a work deemed too provocative for its time. The diary also mentioned a sealed box in the British Museum, its contents known only to the 10 members. The treatise, Poirot said, his voice hushed. It is the truth they guarded. And the box in the museum holds it. Hastings grinned. We're close, Poirot, but how do we get into the vault? Poirot closed the diary, his expression resolute. We return to Monsieur Carver. The key has opened one lock, perhaps it will open another. But we must be swift, Hastings. The shadows of the 10 are long, and I sense we are not the only ones seeking this truth. Back at the British Museum, Carver led them to the vaults, a labyrinth of crates and artifacts. A sealed box was there, its lock matching the key's quill design. Poirot inserted it, and the lid sprang open, revealing a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth. The top sheet bore Christie's handwriting, to the Order of the Quill, Guardians of the Truth. Poirot's hands trembled as he unfolded the papers, revealing a manuscript titled The Philosophy of Justice. It was a dense, eloquent treatise on the morality of crime and punishment, its ideas radical even by modern standards. Poirot read the opening lines aloud, his voice filled with awe. Justice is not a verdict, but a questioner riddle that each soul must solve. Hastings stared, wide-eyed. This is it, Poirot. The truth they hid. But why go to such lengths? Because, Hastings, Poirot said, Madame Christie knew the power of ideas. This treatise in the wrong hands could have been misunderstood, misused. The order protected it, and we have uncovered their secret. As he left the vault, Poirot clutched the manuscript, his heart swelling with triumph. The chapter of the 10 Shadows had closed, but the journey was not over. The manuscript hinted at one final step, a map, hidden in a countryside manor. It'll lead to the Order's final resting place. Poirot walked into the London night, his mind alight with the promise of the next clue, his little gray cells humming with satisfaction. Chapter 7. The society unveiled. The rain pattered against the windows of Poirot's London flat, a gentle but persistent rhythm that seemed to echo the Belgian detective's racing thoughts. The fire in the hearth cast flickering shadows across the room, illuminating the stacks of Agatha Christie novels, cute annotated manuscripts, and cryptic notes that had consumed his days and nights. Hercule Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, his mustache impeccably groomed, his eyes, sharp as day, darted across a yellowed page from the ABC Murders. The discovery of the acrostic poem in the British Museum had been a triumph. But it had also raised a tantalizing question. Who were the 10 minds that guarded Agatha Christie's mysterious code? Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, sat across from him, nursing a cup of tea and looking slightly bewildered by the pile of papers on the table. I say, Poirot, this is getting rather deep, isn't it? A secret society? It sounds like something out of a penny dreadful, not the work of Mrs. Christie. Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. Mon ami, the mind of Agatha Christie was a labyrinth of genius. She wove her mysteries, not only for amusement, but, I suspect, to conceal truths that only the most discerning could uncover. This Order of the Quill, it is no fiction, is the key to the next piece of her puzzle. The acrostic poem from the British Museum had hinted at a group of 10 intellectuals, contemporaries of Christie, who had formed a clandestine society. The poem's final line, their quills guard the truth in shadows, cast had set Poirot's little gray cells ablaze. He had spent the past 2 days scouring literary archives, cross-referencing names, dates, and dedications in Christie's works. The breakthrough had come late the previous night, when he noticed a peculiar dedication in the first edition of the ABC Murders to the order whose words endure. The dedication was innocuous to the casual reader, but Poirot had meticulously counted the letters in each word, mapping them to a substitution cipher. The result was a list of 10 names, each a prominent figure in the literary or intellectual circles of Christie's era. Now, Poirot held the decoded list in his hand, the ink of his own notes still fresh. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, but vibrant with excitement, "we have uncovered the members of the Order of the Quill. Writers, poets, scholars, a mind of brilliance, each bound by a shared secret. But one name stands out: Evelyn Harcourt, a novelist and critic who vanished mysteriously in 1938. Her name appears in the cipher with a curious annotation: Keeper of the Map." Hastings leaned forward, his tea forgotten. "A map, Poirot? Do you think it's literal, or another of these blasted metaphors?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon cher, is what we must discover. Harcourt's last known residence was a manor in the Cotswolds, a place called Willowmere. The order entrusted her with a map. It is there we shall find it." The journey to Willowmere was a study in contrasts. London's gray drizzle gave way to the rolling green hills of the Cotswolds, where the late autumn light painted the landscape in hues of gold and amber. Poirot, dressed in a tailored overcoat and clutching his silver-topped cane, looked distinctly out of place beside Hastings, who had opted for a more practical tweed jacket. The manor itself was a sprawling Tudor relic, its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows exuding an air of faded grandeur. The current owner, a reclusive antiquarian named Mr. Theodore Grayson, had agreed to meet them after Poirot's carefully worded telegram hinted at a literary discovery of unparalleled significance. Grayson greeted them at the door, a wiry man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose and a demeanor that suggested he trusted books more than people. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice clipped. "I confess I'm intrigued, though I'm not sure what you expect to find here. Willowmere hasn't been touched by scandal or mystery since Miss Harcourt's day." Poirot bowed slightly, his politeness impeccable. "Monsieur Grayson, it is not scandal we seek, but a treasure of the mind. Evelyn Harcourt was, I believe, a guardian of something extraordinary, a secret woven into the fabric of Agatha Christie's works. May we explore the manor?" Cousin hesitated, his eyes narrowing, but the lure of literary intrigue was too strong. "Very well," he said, "but mind you, don't disturb my collection. The library alone is worth more than this house." Interior of Willowmere was a maze of dark wood paneling, creaking floorboards, and portraits that seemed to watch their every move. Poirot's attention, however, was drawn to the library, a cavernous room lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves. Dust motes danced in the slanting sunlight, and the air carried the scent of old leather and ink. Hastings let out a low whistle. "Good Lord, Poirot, there must be thousands of books here. How do we even begin?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "With method, Hastings, always with method. If Harcourt was the keeper of the map, she would have hidden it in plain sight, where only those who knew to look would find it." They began their search, Poirot methodically examining the shelves while Hastings poked around less systematically, occasionally muttering about the impracticality of hiding anything in such a cluttered space. Hours passed, and the light outside began to fade. Poirot's fingers traced the spines of countless volumes: Dickens, Austen, Conan Doyle, until he paused at a slim, unassuming book tucked between 2 larger tomes. It was a first edition of The Murder at the Vicarage, the same novel where he had found annotations in St. Mary Mead. But this copy was different. Its spine bore a faint embossing. A quill crossed with a key. "Mon ami," Poirot said softly. "We have found it." He opened the book, revealing a handwritten inscription on the flyleaf, "To Evelyn, who holds the path." Below it was a series of numbers, seemingly random, but Poirot recognized them instantly as coordinates, not geographic, but architectural. They pointed to a specific location within Willowmere. Grayson, who had been hovering nearby, peered over Poirot's shoulder. "What's that? Some sort of code?" "Precisement," Poirot replied, his voice tinged with triumph. "Monsieur Grayson, where in this manner would one find the coordinates 3127? Grayson frowned, adjusting his spectacles. "That's an odd way of putting it, but if I had to guess, it sounds like the old study on the 3rd floor, 12th panel, 7th shelf." Harcourt used that room as her private sanctuary. Poirot and Hastings followed Grayson up a winding staircase, their footsteps echoing in a silent manner. The study was a smaller, cozier space than the library. Its walls lined with oak panels and shelves cluttered with manuscripts and curios. Poirot counted the panels carefully, his fingers brushing against the smooth wood until he reached the 12th. There, hidden behind a false panel, was a concealed latch. With a soft click, the panel swung open, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a locked box, its surface engraved with the same quill and key motif. Poirot's heart quickened. "Hastings, the cipher from the ABC murders, the sequence of letters that named the order. Do you have it?" Hastings fumbled in his pocket, producing a crumpled sheet of paper. The cipher had yielded not only names, but a secondary sequence, a 5-letter combination. Poirot entered the letters QELL to the box's combination lock. With a satisfying clunk, it opened. Inside lay a folded map, its edges brittle but intact. Poirot unfolded it carefully, revealing a hand-drawn chart of England, marked with 10 locations, each accompanied by a cryptic symbol, a quill, a rose, a clock, and others. At the center was a note in Harcourt's elegant script. The orders. "Truth lies where the quills converge." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Magnif, the map is the key, Hastings. These locations, they are tied to Christie's novels, her life, her secrets. The order of the quill hid their truth across England, and we shall follow their trail." Grayson, now thoroughly caught up in the excitement, leaned closer. "This is extraordinary. Do you think it's some sort of literary treasure?" Poirot's smile was cryptic. "Perhaps, Monsieur Grayson. Or perhaps it is something greater, a truth that Agatha Christie and her order wished to preserve for those worthy to find it." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings sat in the Manor's dining room, the map spread before them. The 10 locations were scattered across England. A cliffside estate in Cornwall, a village in Devon, a theater in London, and others. Each was marked with a symbol that Poirot suspected corresponded to a specific Christie novel or theme. The challenge now was to determine where to begin. "I say, Poirot," Hastings ventured, "this feels like a wild goose chase. 10 locations. We can't possibly visit them all." Poirot tapped the map with his cane. "Hastings, we must be selective. The symbols, they are not random. Look here." He pointed to the quill symbol, marked near a location in Devon. "This is St. Mary Mead, the village of Miss Marple. We have already found a clue there. The quill suggests a connection to the order itself. We shall start with the rose." The rose symbol was marked near a manor in Yorkshire, a place called Rosethorn Hall. Poirot's research had uncovered a tenuous link. Evelyn Harcourt had visited Yorkshire in 1937, shortly before her disappearance, and Christie herself had mentioned a rose garden in her correspondence with a friend. It was a slender thread, but Poirot's instincts told him it was the right one as they prepared to leave Willowmere. Grayson approached, his earlier skepticism replaced by enthusiasm. "Mr. Poirot, if you find this treasure, whatever it is, will you let me know? I've spent my life preserving books, but this is history." Poirot bowed. "You have my word, monsieur. The truth, when uncovered, shall be shared with those who value it." The journey to Rosethorn Hall took them through windswept moors and narrow lanes, the landscape growing wilder as they approached the Yorkshire dales. The hall itself was a Gothic pile, its towers looming against a slate-gray sky. The current occupant, a formidable widow named Lady Beatrice Ashford, greeted them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Her late husband, she explained, had been a collector of rare manuscripts, and Rosethorn Hall was rumored to house secrets of its own. "Evelyn Harcourt," Lady Ashford said, her voice sharp. "Yes, I've heard the name. My husband mentioned her once, a writer who stayed here decades ago. She left behind a journal, I believe, but it's locked away in the attic. I've never had the patience for riddles." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Madame, may we see this journal?" The attic was a labyrinth of crates and cobwebs, the air thick with dust. Lady Ashford led them to a locked chest, its surface carved with a rose motif. Poirot, ever observant, noticed that the lock was a combination type, similar to the one at Willowmere. Using the same 5-letter sequence, QIL, he opened it, revealing a leather-bound journal. The journal was Harcourt's, its pages filled with musings on literature, justice, and the order of the quill. One entry stood out: "The rose hides the path to the clock. Seek the hour when shadows align." Below, it was a sketch of a sundial, its gnomon casting a shadow at 3 o'clock. Hastings scratched his head. A sundial in Yorkshire seems a bit fanciful, doesn't it? Poirot's smile was serene. "Not fanciful, Hastings. Precise. There is a sundial in the rose garden of Rosethorn Hall. I saw it from the window. We must examine it at 3 o'clock tomorrow." The rose garden was a riot of color, even in late autumn, with crimson blooms defying the chill. The sundial stood at its center, an ancient stone structure etched with Latin inscriptions. As 3 o'clock approached, Poirot and Hastings watched the shadow creep across the dial. When it aligned with the 3 o'clock mark, a faint click sounded, and a small compartment opened at the base of the sundial. Inside was a single sheet of vellum, inscribed with a poem, in shadows cast by quill and clock. "The truth lies hidden in the rock where tides retreat and secrets sleep. The orders vow you shall keep." Poirot read the poem aloud, his voice resonant in the quiet garden. "The clock leads to the rock, Hastings. The next location on the map, a cliffside estate in Cornwall, marked with the clock symbol. It is there we shall find the next piece of the puzzle." Lady Ashford, who had joined them, gasped. "This is unbelievable. A secret society, hidden in plain sight all these years." Poirot nodded. Madame Agatha Christie was not merely a writer. She was a guardian of ideas, and the Order of the Quill was her chosen circle. "We are close, Hastings, very close, to unveiling their truth." As they left Rosethorn Hall, the map tucked safely in Poirot's satchel, the detective felt a surge of triumph. The Order of the Quill was no longer a shadow, it was a tangible network of minds, each guarding a piece of Christie's grand design. The journey to Cornwall would be their next step, but for now, Poirot allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The little gray cells had prevailed once more, and the path to the truth was clearer than ever. Yet, as the car wound through the darkening moors, Poirot's mind lingered on the poem's final line: "The orders vow you shall keep." What vow had Christie and her companions made? And what truth was so profound that it required such an elaborate code to protect it? The answers lay ahead, in the cliffs of Cornwall, where the clock would tick closer to revelation. Chapter 8. The maps riddled the dawn, broke over the rolling hills of Devon, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of a wind-swept cliff, his neatly pressed suit a stark contrast to the wild landscape. Kate. Air carried the temps of salt from the sea below, and the distant cry of gulls punctuated the rhythmic crash of waves. In his gloved hands, he held the map, a brittle, yellowed sheet uncovered from the lockbox in the manner of the Order of the Quill. Its 10 marked locations, each tied to an Agatha Christie novel, were a puzzle that had consumed him for days. Now, standing at the first of these sites, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of a mystery unfolding. His little gray cells humming with anticipation. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood beside him, his scarf flapping in the breeze. "I say, Poirot, this map is a dashed peculiar thing. It's 10 locations, all scattered across England, and not a single clue as to what we're looking for. It's like chasing a ghost." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of amusement. "Keys, a ghost, it may seem, but Agatha Christie, she does not write for ghosts. She writes for minds that seek order in chaos. This map, it is not random. Each mark is a step in our dance, and we shall follow it. The map, with its cryptic symbols, a cross here, a spiral there, a triangle at the edge of a coastline, pointed to sites that resonated with Christie's stories. The first, where they now stood, was a cliffside estate near Torquay, the inspiration for Peril at End House. The grand house loomed behind them, its windows dark, its gardens overgrown. Poirot's eyes traced the map's first mark, a tiny star, etched beside a sketch of a cliff. "This place," he murmured. "It holds the first piece of the riddle. But we must look beyond the obvious." They approached the estate, its weathered facade whispering a forgotten grandeur. The door creaked open under Poirot's gentle push, revealing a foyer thick with dust. Hastings sneezed, muttering about the state of the place, but Poirot's attention was fixed on a faded tapestry depicting a stormy sea. "Hastings, regardless. The map star at is not the cliff itself, but something within this house. A star, a beacon, perhaps a light." They searched the ground floor, finding little but cobwebs and chipped furniture. In the library, however, Poirot paused before a heavy oak bookcase. Its shelves sagged under the weight of leather-bound volumes, many of them Christie's own works. He ran a gloved finger along the spines, stopping at Peril at End House. "This," he said, pulling the book free, "is no coincidence." The book fell open to a marked page where a single sentence was underlined in faint ink. "The tide waits for no man, but the truth waits for the patient." Beside it, in the margin, was a crude drawing of a star. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The tide, Hastings. The map speaks of time and tide. You must look to the sea." They hurried to the cliff's edge, where a narrow path wound down to a rocky cove. The tide was low, exposing a cave mouth that glistened with seaweed. Hastings hesitated, eyeing the slick rocks. "You're not suggesting we go in there, Poirot? It looks frightfully treacherous." "Treacherous, but necessary," Poirot replied, already descending with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature. "The truth, it hides in places most would avoid." Inside the cave, the air was damp and heavy, the walls slick with salt. Poirot's torch cast eerie shadows, revealing tidal pools that shimmered like liquid glass. At the cave's deepest point, they found a stone slab, its surface carved with a star identical to the map's. Beneath it, half buried in sand, was a small, waterproof case. Poirot knelt, his fingers trembling with excitement as he pried it open. Inside lay a microfilm, its edges curled but intact. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, holding the microfilm to the light. "This is no ordinary clue. It is a treasure preserved against the tide." Back at their temporary lodgings in Torquay, charming inn with a view of the sea. Poirot and Hastings examined the microfilm using a borrowed projector. The images flickered to life. Pages of a partial manuscript, written in Christie's precise hand, but interspersed with a ciphered text. The first line read, "The final key lies where the curtain falls." Poirot's breath caught. "Curtain," he said. "Her last novel for me, Poirot." "This is personal, Hastings." The manuscript cipher was a complex beast, a mix of symbols and numbers that defied immediate interpretation. Poirot spent hours poring over it, his notebook filling with scribbled theories. Hastings, meanwhile, busied himself with the ends, T-surface, muttering about the indecipherable nature of codes. "Why couldn't she just write it in plain English, Poirot? All this cloak and dagger stuff, it's enough to drive a man to drink." Poirot chuckled. "Patience, mon ami. Christie. She writes for the clever, not the impatient. This cipher, it is a visionaire, I am certain. We need only the key." The next morning, they set out for the second location on the map, a quaint village in the Cotswolds, linked to the murder at the vicarage. The map symbol here was a spiral, drawn beside a sketch of a church. The village of St. Mary Mead, or its real-world counterpart, was a picture of pastoral charmstone cottages, blooming gardens, and a church steeple piercing the sky. Poirot felt a pang of nostalgia, recalling Miss Marple's quiet brilliance, so different from his own methodical flair. At the church, they met the vicar, a jovial man named Mr. Clement, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Christie's fictional counterpart. "You're not the first to come poking about," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Agatha was fond of this place, left a bit of herself here, or so they say." Poirot's interest piqued. "Can what, pray, did she leave?" The vicar led them to the church's crypt, a cool, shadowy space lined with ancient tombs. On one wall, a spiral was carved, barely visible beneath centuries of grime. Poirot traced it with his finger, feeling the faint grooves of letters beneath. "Hastings," a cloth, vite, cleating the stone, revealed an inscription. "The spiral turns where wisdom rests." Poirot's mind raced. Wisdom, a library, perhaps, or a place of learning. They returned to the village library, a cozy building overflowing with books. There, among the stacks, Poirot found a first edition of The Murder at the Vicarage with a spiral embossed on its cover. Inside, a folded note bore a single word, Marple. It was a confirmation, a thread tying the clues together. The note also included a grid of numbers, a cipher that matched the microfilm structure. That evening, over a dinner of roast lamb at the inn, Poirot decoded the grid, using Marple as the visionaire key. The result was a coordinate set, pointing to a manor in Kent, the third location on the map. "We progress, Hastings," Poirot said, sipping his tisane. "But each step, it reveals a deeper layer. Christie, she plays a game of many dimensions." The manor in Kent, linked to the hollow, was a sprawling estate surrounded by yew hedges. The map's symbol here was a triangle, sketched beside a drawing of a fountain. The manor's current owner, a reclusive artist named Lady Anquetel, welcomed them with eccentric warmth. "You're after Agatha's secrets, aren't you?" she said, her eyes sharp despite her airy demeanor. "She was a friend of my grandmother's, left something in the garden, I'll wager." The garden was a labyrinth of roses and statues, centered around a marble fountain shaped like a triangle. Poirot examined it, noting the water's flow seemed misaligned, as if something blocked the pipes. With Lady Anquetel's permission, he drained the fountain, revealing a sealed compartment in its base. Inside was a small brass key, engraved with a triangle and the word hollow. "This key," Poirot said, turning it over in his hands, "it unlocks the next door." "But where?" Lady Anquetel, sipping tea on the lawn, offered a cryptic hint. Agatha loved her games. She'd say, "Look where the shadows fall. Try the conservatory at dusk." At dusk, The conservatory's glass walls caught the setting sun, casting triangular shadows across the floor. One shadow aligned perfectly with the tiled mosaic, which, when pressed, revealed a hidden drawer. Inside was another microfilm, this one containing a sketch of a clock and a ciphered message. Time turns the lock at the house of Poirot. Poirot's heart quickened. Poirot at End House again. The circle, it closes. They returned to the cliffside estate. The map's symbols now forming a pattern in Poirot's mind star, spiral, triangle, each a piece of a larger design. The clock in the estate's drawing room, an ornate piece with a star-shaped pendulum, ticked loudly in the silence. Using the brass key, Poirot opened a panel beneath it, revealing a final microfilm. This one was different. A single page, written in Christie's hand, with a cipher that read, "The final key lies where the curtain falls, but only when the tide is right." The reference to curtain was unmistakable, but the tide puzzled him. Back at the cave, Poirot timed their visit for high tide, when the water lapped at the stone slab. A hidden groove, visible only when submerged, accepted the brass key. With a groan, the slab shifted, revealing a waterproof case containing a leather-bound journal. Its pages detailed Christie's creation of the coda literary game designed for the Order of the Quill. Meant to protect a philosophical treatise on justice, Poirot sat in the cave, the journal in his lap, the sea's roar echoing around him. "She was a genius, Hastings," he said, his voice soft with awe. "This code, it is not just a puzzle. It's her legacy, a challenge to those who seek truth." Hastings, soaked from the tide, grinned. "And you've cracked it, old chap. But what's this treatise she's hiding?" Chapter 9. The final key. Hercule Poirot sat at the polished mahogany desk in his London flat. The dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. The air was thick with the scent of old books and the faint temps of his tisane, steaming in a delicate porcelain cup. Pour him, like curtain, Agatha Christie's final novel, featuring his own fictional exploits. Its pages worn from repeated readings. The book felt heavier tonight, as though it carried the weight of the mystery that had consumed him for weeks, of mystery that wove through Christie's entire oeuvre, a hidden code that had eluded scholars and cryptographers for decades. His fingers, precise and deliberate, traced the lines of dialogue on the open page. The words seemed to hum with hidden meaning, their cadence almost musical. Poirot's little gray sails were alight, piecing together the fragments of clues gathered from his journey. The anonymous letter signed AC, the numerical sequences in Murder on the Orient Express, the cryptic phrase from Death on the Nile, the coded notebook in Egypt, the annotated murder at the vicarage, the Polybius Square Inn, and then there were none, the acrostic poem in the British Museum, the Order of the Quill, and the microfilm in the tidal cave. Each discovery had propelled him forward, a breadcrumb trail laid by a literary genius. Now, in curtain, he sensed the culmination of it all, the final key promised by the microfilm. The microfilm's message, decoded in the previous chapter, had been tantalizingly brief. In Curtin's words, the truth speaks. Seek the dialogue where justice bends. Use the name. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The name, he was certain, was Christie. The method, he suspected, was a Whodunit cipher, a favorite of cryptographers for its elegance and complexity. But the dialogue in Curtain was dense, layered with moral ambiguity and Poirot's own reflections on justice. Finding the right passage would require precision. He leaned back, stroking his mustache, and murmured, "Mon ami, the truth is never given freely. It hides, like a jewel in a locked box, waiting for the right key." His gaze drifted to the window where the London night pressed against the glass, a tapestry of stars obscured by city lights. Somewhere out there, in the labyrinth of Christie's words, lay the answer. The pattern emerges. Poirot began by marking every significant dialogue in curtain. The novel, set in the familiar Styles Court, was a meditation on mortality and morality, with Poirot confronting his own frailty while unraveling a final case. The dialogue was rich with subtext, each character's words a potential vessel for the code. He focused on exchanges involving justice, as the microfilm had suggested. One passage stood out, spoken by Poirot himself to Hastings. "Justice is a curious thing, my friend. It is not always about what is done, but what must be done." He wrote the passage down, assigning each letter a numerical value based on its position in the alphabet. A equals 1, B equals 2, ... C equals 26. The sequence was irregular, but when he applied the Whodunit cipher, using Christie as the key word, the numbers shifted. The key word's letters, repeated to match the length of the passage, altered each letter's position in a predictable pattern. After an hour of meticulous calculation, the decoded text revealed a fragment: London Hotel fireplace. Poirot's heart quickened. "Mais oui," he exclaimed, slapping the desk. "The final key is literal, a place, not a metaphor. Done. But which hotel?" London was dotted with historic establishments, many of which Christie herself had frequented. The Ritz, the Savoy, Claridge's, all were possibilities. He needed more. He returned to the novel, scouring for additional clues. Another dialogue later in the book caught his attention. It was a seemingly innocuous exchange between Poirot and a secondary character, Norton, about the passage of time. "Time, monsieur, is the great revealer. It uncovers what we hide, even from ourselves." When subjected to the same cipher, it yielded a date and time: the 15th of March, 1925, 8 p.m. Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. The date was significant within Christie's active writing years, a time when she was crafting her early masterpieces. The specificity suggested a real event, perhaps one tied to the Order of the Quill, the secret society he had uncovered in Chapter 7. But the hotel remained elusive. He needed context, a connection to Christie's life. He summoned Captain Hastings, who arrived promptly, his face flushed from the chilly March evening. "Poirot, you look like a man who's found a treasure map but forgotten where he parked his ship," Hastings said, shedding his coat. Poirot smiled thinly. "Not a map, Hastings, but a destination. A London hotel, a fireplace, and a date, the 15th of March, 1925, 8 p.m. We must find which hotel holds the secret." Hastings frowned. "That's 40 years ago. Fireplaces don't just sit there waiting to be opened. What if it's been renovated or demolished?" "Patience, mon ami," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "The mind of Agatha Christie is precise. She would choose a place of permanence, a hotel with history, one that endures." They pored over Christie's biography, cross-referencing her known haunts with hotels prominent in 1925. The Savoy emerged as a likely candidate. Christie had dined there often, and its grand architecture, including its iconic fireplaces, remained largely unchanged. Poirot's instincts told him it was the right choice, but he needed confirmation. The Savoy secrets the next evening. Poirot and Hastings arrived at the Savoy, its opulent facade glowing under the London streetlights. The lobby was a marvel of Art Deco elegance, with polished marble floors and chandeliers that cast a warm, golden light. Poirot, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, moved with purpose, his cane clicking softly against the floor. Hastings trailed behind, looking slightly out of place in his tweed jacket. The concierge, a wiry man with a meticulous mustache that rivaled Poirot's, greeted them warmly. "Monsieur Poirot, a pleasure. How may the Savoy assist you?" Poirot inclined his head. "I seek a particular fireplace, one that may hold historical significance. Perhaps in a private dining room or a suite used in the 1920s. The concierge raised an eyebrow but nodded. The river room has a fireplace that dates back to the hotel's opening in 1889. It's rarely used now, but it's intact. Would you like to see it? Most certainly, Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. The river room was a vision of faded grandeur, its walls adorned with murals of the Thames. The fireplace, a massive structure of carved oak and marble, dominated one end of the room. Approached it, his fingers brushing the intricate carvings. He searched for anomalies, a loose brick, a hidden panel, anything that might conceal a compartment. Hastings watched, skeptical. Poirot, this feels like looking for a needle in a haystack. What if the clue's outdated? Tana. Non, Poirot said, his voice firm. Christie's puzzles are timeless. The fireplace is the key, and the key is here. He examined the mantel, noting a series of carved initials in the wood. Most were random, likely left by guests over the decades, but one set stood out. A.C. The same initials as the anonymous letter. Below them was a small, almost imperceptible indentation. Poirot pressed it, and with a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a narrow compartment. Hastings gasped. Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with a quill, the symbol of the Order of the Quill. Poirot's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The pages were filled with Christie's elegant handwriting, detailing the creation of the code as a literary game for the Order, a challenge to protect a philosophical treatise on justice. The journal included a final cipher, a complex polybius square that required a keyword to unlock. Poirot read aloud. The treatise is the heart of the game, hidden to provoke thought, to challenge the mind. Only those who seek justice with clarity will find it. The journal's revelations back at his flat, Poirot worked late into the night, decoding the journal's final cipher. The keyword, he deduced, was justice, a theme that ran through Christie's works and the journal's text. The polybius square, when solved, revealed the treatise's location within these pages. The truth resides. Read and understand. The journal itself was the treatise's series of essays penned by Christie, exploring the morality of justice. Each essay was a meditation on a different aspect: retribution, mercy, fairness, and the human cost of judgment. The prose was luminous, blending philosophical depth with the clarity of a master storyteller. Poirot read passages aloud to Hastings, who listened, rapt. Listen, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice soft with awe. Justice is not a scale to be balanced, but a mirror to reflect our flaws. To judge is to understand, and to understand is to forgive. Yet forgiveness must not erase consequence. Mondre, what insight! Hastings nodded, his usual joviality replaced by reverence. It's like she's speaking to us, Poirot. Not just as a writer, but as a philosopher. The essays were interspersed with notes on the code's creation, revealing Christie's intent to craft a puzzle that would endure a legacy for those who valued intellect and morality. The Order of the Quill had been her collaborators, a group of like-minded intellectuals who believed literature could challenge societal norms. The code was their shared secret, a game to inspire future generations. Poirot closed the journal, his heart full. This, Hastings, is her masterpiece. Not just her novels, but this call to think, to question, to seek truth. The gathering determined to honor Christie's vision. Poirot organized a small gathering at his flat the following week. He invited a select group of scholars, literary experts, cryptographers, and historians who had followed rumors of the code for years. The room was warm with candlelight, the air alive with anticipation. Poirot stood, the journal in hand, and addressed the group. Mesdames et messieurs, tonight we unveil a treasure not of gold, but of thought. Agatha Christie, through her genius, has given us a gift to treat us on justice, hidden within a code that demanded our best selves to unlock. He read the essays aloud, his voice steady and clear, each word resonating with the weight of Christie's wisdom. The scholars listened in silence, some taking notes, others simply absorbing the words. When he finished, the room erupted in quiet murmurs of admiration. One scholar, the spectacled woman with a sharp intellect, spoke up. "Monsieur Poirot, this changes everything." Christie wasn't just a storyteller. She was a philosopher, challenging us to rethink justice itself. Another, a cryptographer with a grizzled beard, added, "The code was brilliant. Layers upon layers, each clue a masterpiece of misdirection and precision. Only someone like you could have solved it." Poirot bowed his head, modest but proud. "It was not I alone, but the collective mind, the order of the quill, Hastings, and all of you who believed in the puzzle's worth." A moment of reflection as the guests departed. Poirot stood by the window, gazing at the London skyline. The city was alive, its lights a constellation of human endeavor. He felt a profound satisfaction, not just in solving the mystery, but in uncovering Christie's deeper intent. The code had been a journey, each clue a step toward understanding not just the puzzle, but the human condition. Hastings joined him, a glass of brandy in hand. "Well, Poirot, you've done it. The code's cracked, the treatise found. What now?" Poirot smiled, his eyes distant. "Now, mon ami, we let the treatise speak. It will find its way into the world, as Christie intended. And I shall rest, content that my little gray cells have served her well." The night stretched on, and Poirot remained by the window, the journal tucked safely in his desk. The mystery was not yet complete. The final chapter awaited, where the treatise would be shared with the world. But for now, he savored the triumph of the final key, the culmination of a puzzle that had tested his intellect and honored a literary legend. Chapter 10. The code unlocked. The fog hung low over London, draping the city in a silvery veil as Hercule Poirot stepped out of the hansom cab, his polished shoes clicking against the damp cobblestones of Russell Square. The night was crisp, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked stone and the faint perfume of autumn leaves. His gloved hand clutched a small, leather-bound journal, its edges worn, but its contents a revelation that had set his mind ablaze. The journal, uncovered in the hidden compartment of the fireplace at the Langham Hotel, was the final piece of Agatha Christie's intricate puzzle that had consumed him for weeks, leading him through a labyrinth of ciphers, manuscripts, and secrets buried in the pages of her novels. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache twitching as he surveyed the quiet street. The journal contained the key to a philosophical treatise, a work Christie had crafted not for publication, but as a challenge to the minds of the Order of the Quill, a clandestine society of literary luminaries who had guarded her secret. The treatise, he had learned, was no mere story, but a meditation on just a subject close to Poirot's heart. For was not justice the very cornerstone of his life's work? Yet the final cipher within the journal had taken hours to unravel, its complexity a testament to Christie's genius. Now, with the decoded text burning in his mind, Poirot was ready to unveil the truth. He glanced at his pocket watch. 7:45 p.m. The gathering he had arranged was to begin at 8. In a private room at the Russell Hotel, a stone's throw from where he stood. He had invited a select group: Captain Hastings, his loyal friend and confidant; Dr. Eleanor Whitby, a Cambridge scholar of literature who had aided him in deciphering the Vigenère cipher in Curtin; and Sir Charles Mortimer, a retired barrister and Christie enthusiast who had provided access to rare manuscripts. Helena. There was also Miss Clara Henshaw, young cryptographer whose sharp mind had proven invaluable in cracking the Polybius Square in. And then there were none. Together, they would bear witness to the culmination of Poirot's quest as he crossed the square. The hotel's golden lights glowed through the fog, a beacon of warmth. Poirot's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought him here. From the enigmatic letter signed A.C., the coded notebook in Egypt, the annotated first edition in St. Mary Mead. The microfilm in the title Key Clue had been a thread in a tapestry of brilliance. Christie had woven her code, not merely to conceal, but to provoke, to challenge the reader to see beyond the surface of her stories. And now, the treatise awaited, its words promising to illuminate her deepest thoughts on the nature of justice. Inside the hotel, the lobby was a bustle of elegant men in tailored suits, women in fur-trimmed coats, the clink of crystal glasses from the bar. Poirot ascended the grand staircase to the private dining room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the oak-paneled walls. The room was intimate, with a long mahogany table set for five, a chandelier above casting prisms of light. Hastings was already there, polishing his spectacles with a handkerchief, tease, face alight with anticipation. "Poirot, old chap," Hastings exclaimed, rising. "You've got that gleam in your eye. It's the same one you had when you solved the Orient Express business. Is it done? Have you cracked the final code?" Poirot allowed himself a small smile, his fingers brushing the journal in his pocket. "Mon ami, the little gray cells have triumphed, as they always do. Patience. Our guests arrive, and the revelation must be shared." Dr. Whitby entered next, her silver hair swept into a neat bun, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice tinged with excitement, "I've been rereading Curtain since you telephoned. The dialogue patterns you mentioned extraordinary. I can scarcely believe Christie hid such a cipher in plain sight." "It is her genius," Madame Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "To hide the profound in the ordinary, this is the mark of Agatha Christie." Sir Charles Mortimer followed, his cane tapping the floor, his weathered face creased with a grin. "Poirot, you've dragged me out of retirement for this. I trust it's worth it." Christie's mind was a labyrinth, and I've spent years lost in it. "And you, Sir Charles, have provided the map," Poirot said graciously. "Your collection of manuscripts was most illuminating." Miss Clara Henshaw arrived last, her auburn hair catching the firelight, her notebook clutched tightly. "I've been running the cipher through every algorithm I know," she said breathlessly. "The journal's final code, it's a masterpiece." "Did you solve it?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mais, oui, mademoiselle. But come, let us sit. The hour approaches, and the truth must be unveiled." They gathered around the table, the fire's warmth enveloping them. Poirot placed the journal at the center, its leather cover unassuming yet heavy with significance. He opened it to the final page, where his neat handwriting had transcribed the decoded text. The room fell silent, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the distant hum of London beyond the windows. "My friends," Poirot began, his voice steady but resonant, "we have journeyed together through a puzzle unlike any other. From the letter that arrived at my flat to the clues hidden in Christie's novels, we have followed a trail laid by a mind of unparalleled brilliance. This journal, discovered in the Langham Hotel, contains the final cipher Vigenère cipher, as Mademoiselle Clara suspected, the keyword Christie. Its message led me to this treatise, a work Agatha Christie crafted not for the public, but for those who could unlock her code." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Hastings leaned forward, his eyes wide. "And what is it, Poirot? What did she hide?" Poirot's fingers traced the journal's edge. "It is a philosophical treatise on justice, written as a challenge to the Order of the Quill, that secret society of writers and thinkers we uncovered. Christie believed justice was not merely the domain of law, but of the human heart. Her stories, her murders, her detectives were her way of exploring this truth. But this treatise, it is her soul laid bare. He opened the journal to a marked page and began to read aloud, his voice clear and measured. Each word carrying the weight of Christie's intent. Justice is the balance of the soul. The silent arbiter that weighs not only the act, but the intent. To punish is human. To understand is divine. In every crime lies a story, and in every story a truth. The detective seeks not only the culprit, but the wither fracture in the human spirit that leads to transgression. True justice does not end with a verdict. It begins with comprehension, with the courage to see the world through the eyes of the guilty and the innocent alike. The room was still, the words hanging in the air like a sacred incantation. Dr. Whitby's eyes glistened, and she murmured, "It's beautiful." She's speaking to the very essence of her work. Sir Charles nodded slowly. It's as if she's distilled every Poirot, every marple, into this single idea. Justice as understanding. Clara, ever practical, tapped her notebook. But why hide it? Why go to such lengths as ciphers, manuscripts, secret societies? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his amusement. Because Mademoiselle Christie was a storyteller. She knew the power of a mystery to captivate, to provoke thought. This treatise was not meant for the masses, but for those who would seek it, who would prove themselves worthy by unraveling her code. It was her game, her Lagosian challenge to future generations to think deeply about justice. Hastings, ever the romantic, leaned back in his chair. And you, Poirot, you've done it. You've unlocked her masterpiece. Poirot inclined his head, accepting the praise with humility. Not alone, mon ami. Each of you has played a part. Dr. Whitby, your knowledge of literature illuminated the patterns in curtains. Charles, your archives revealed the order of the quill. Mademoiselle Clara's cryptographic skill broke the ciphers that guarded the truth. And you, Hastings, your loyalty and enthusiasm have sustained me. The group exchanged smiles, a shared sense of triumph warming the room. Poirot continued, but the treatise is more than words. The key, it is a call to action. Kitty asks us to consider justice, not as a destination, but as a journey. To solve a crime is to restore order, yes, but to understand it is to heal the world. Turned the journal's pages, revealing more of the treatise. It was not long, perhaps 10 pages, but each paragraph was dense with insight. Weaving together Christie's observations on human nature, morality, and the role of the detective, she wrote of the balance between retribution and mercy, the danger of judgment without empathy, and the power of stories to reveal truth that law alone could not. As Poirot read, the group discussed, their voices animated. Dr. Whitby drew parallels to Christie's novels, noting how Miss Marple's quiet observation mirrored the treatise's call for understanding. Sir Charles shared anecdotes from his legal career, where empathy had often led to fairer outcomes than strict adherence to the law. Clara, ever curious, asked about the order of the quill, wondering if other members had left similar puzzles. Poirot, with a twinkle in his eye, admitted the possibility, but cautioned that this mystery was complete. The clock struck 9, and Poirot closed the journal. My friends, we have unlocked Agatha Christie's code, and in doing so, we have honored her legacy. This treatise will not be published. It was not her wish. But we will share it with those who study her work, who will appreciate its depth. Tonight, we are the guardians of her secret. He raised a glass of port, the others following suit. To Agatha Christie, he toasted, and to the little gray cells that have brought us here. The glasses clinked, the firelight dancing in their eyes. The conversation turned lighter, with Hastings recounting their adventures in Egypt, Clara teasing him about his fear of the tidal cave, and Sir Charles regaling them with tales of Christie's wit at literary gatherings. Poirot listened, content, his mind at peace for the first time in weeks. As the evening drew to a close, the group dispersed, each promising to keep the treatise's secret. Poirot lingered, standing by the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded city. London was a tapestry of stories, each light in the darkness, a life, a mystery, a truth waiting to be uncovered. He thought of Christie, her novels a mirror to the human soul, her code a testament to her belief in the power of the mind. He slipped the journal into his pocket and stepped into the night, his cane tapping lightly on the pavement. The fog parted before him as if bowing to his triumph. Hercule Poirot, detective, had solved the greatest puzzle of his career. Not a crime, but a question. And in that question, he had found not only Agatha Christie's truth, but his own. The mystery was solved, the code unlocked, and the legacy of Agatha Christie forever enriched. Poirot walked on, his heart light, his little gray cells at rest, knowing he had honored the greatest storyteller of them all.